And I'm really, really thrilled that I have a couple of amazing women to help us to deliver our session around housing. So women making places is a big, big subject, but we wanted to start by looking at housing, as I say. And I want to welcome Caroline Bernard and B. Roberts. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I won't do them justice otherwise. So Caroline, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Head of Communications and Advocacy at Homeless Link, which is an organisation that is a membership body for homelessness sector in England, and we have 800 plus members, all of whom are providers of homelessness services, local authorities, housing associations, and a range of things there. I'm also on the board of the Forty Societies, which is how Sheila came to invite me today. So really happy to be here and happy to discuss this issue with you. It's very important, especially today, and I think it'll be a good discussion today. Looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And B, another Londoner, actually. We've got two Londoners joining us today. Isn't that marvellous that they haven't had to travel all the way from London, but we have them here in our front rooms. So B, welcome. Please tell us a bit about yourself, B.
Hello there, everyone. My name is B. Roberts. I'm an activist with a small charity called ATD Fourth World, and I have a long history of lived experience of homelessness and disability.
Thanks very much indeed, B. So we're going to listen in a minute to an audio of a young woman who does live in Milton Keynes, because we want to consider the difficulties of finding and keeping somewhere to live. And we also want to consider, are there any added challenges if you're female? So if we can listen, first of all, to an audio tape from a young woman who's 24, she's in the YMCA in Milton Keynes at present. We'll refer to her as Kay. And this is just a couple of minutes of an interview that she kindly gave me a week or so ago. So just try and make sure that you really concentrate, because she gets an awful lot into her 2 minutes. So if we can listen to the audio, please.
Just bear with me a moment. Something flashed up on my screen and has put layers of tiling on top of the thing I was aiming to share. So it's coming up now. Second. Sorry, a moment. I'm really sorry about this. We've had some slight technical hitches earlier, and I thought this was going to be fine, but just a moment.
I didn't see what those little birds were. The yellow, right here. No.
So sorry, it was lined up for the other one, which was the video, and I've now got to go right back to get the audio. That's what's delaying me. Sorry about that.
I lost my job, and whilst I lost my job, I was renting a place, well, a room that was above the threshold of housing benefit, and my outgoings were higher than my incoming. So it left me in a position where I was made homeless because I was contracted to pay so much out that I couldn't get out of. So, you know, it left me in a position where then I had to move in with, at the time, my boyfriend, which I hadn't really known him for that long, was in a bit of an awkward position, didn't really want to do that, to be honest. Then that broke down, and then I was homeless, and I went to the council, and they were pretty useless, to be honest. They didn't really want to help. All they said was they would fund a train ticket for me to go up to my best friend's who lives in Ramsgate, and that was about all the help they gave. My support worker at the time, she worked for P3, she was ringing them trying to get something in place because I have autism, and it didn't seem to even come across their brains this was affecting me. They really didn't care. They didn't care if I was sleeping under a bridge. That was the situation. Then I found the YMCA myself, and I mentioned it to the person that works at the council. I mentioned about her, he didn't. So that's the situation. I just want my own little flat, just a 1-bed flat, so I can flourish my life independently. But whether that will happen, I'm not sure. As much as I can work towards that, it's very hard on your own, being single, to get there. Especially with dealing with your mental health, and managing what you can personally cope with at work, and then, you know, you've got to balance that. So I don't know. I'm going to be going to uni in September, which is really good. But yeah, there is support around, obviously, even if I move out of here, you go citizen advice and stuff, but it's sort of clouded support. It's nothing that creates a real strict plan. So it's a bit, you know, but I'll be all right.
Thank you.
Oh, yes.
So I wanted to ask Bea and Caroline if they could kick off by, you know, that's quite a powerful story. There's a lot more she told us, and I do want to say that we didn't approach the council for a comment because we do understand how much pressure local councils are at the moment, are under at the moment. But we wanted to look in particular at the sort of generic issues around housing. So how common, how typical do you think her story is? And are there any specific issues around being female that make finding and keeping accommodation a little more difficult? Caroline, would you like to kick us off?
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that story, and thanks to the lady for sharing that with us. I think it's really important that we hear women's voices, and this was a very powerful story, as you said, Sheila. As I heard it, I thought about the Homelessness Reduction Act, which is a duty on local authorities to give people advice and information if they are at risk of becoming homeless. So I'm not quite sure. Obviously, you have spoken to the council, and you can't say what they said, but I'm not sure why that wasn't enacted on this occasion. She should actually have had, you know, quite clear, proper advice given to her before she became homeless. So that's one thing that I would want to, you know, question on that. We have heard examples of people being told by local areas to sleep rough before they can get support, rather than preventing them sleeping rough. So there are some really concerning stories, and women in particular, this is clearly an unsafe situation for anybody. For women in particular, this is unsafe. And there's something for me about services having that kind of gendered state of mind when they're actually talking to somebody. If it's a woman in front of them who's a single woman, would you give a single woman a ticket to go to Ramsgate on her own? Is that the right thing to do? So it's thinking, you know, as you're talking to the individual you're working with about their situation and what's safe for them and what's right for them. And sadly, this didn't happen for this individual.
Thank you. And Bea, what was your reaction when you listened to Kay speaking?
I felt awful. She actually her situation sounds a lot like mine at her age. And I went round all the council and all the charity supports, and it does come across that unless you are very well researched in what is available, what is the law, who's meant to provide what and when, if you don't know that information yourself, no one will tell you. And if you do try and actually point out that you know what you're entitled to according to your human rights or your personal situation, you will often be fobbed off with, well, we'll give you a ticket to go to another borough where once you arrive, you are no longer our problem. So it's another way of kind of shifting someone who is homeless off their books and onto someone else's. Another issue is if you're a woman, you're more likely to be a hidden homeless. So sofa surfing, staying with friends. Also, a lot of women don't sleep on the streets. They tend to find places that are more secure. Like I would sleep in a tent in the park, which was, you know, at the back of a nature reserve. So the street patrols don't necessarily find us. In her situation, I was there only a year ago, and it took a GoFundMe to put this very roof over my head. So I understand that it's so difficult, even when you do get a place, to then stay in a place. especially if your circumstances are a bit precarious or if you're relying on benefits. It took me 6 months to get the housing element of universal credit to pay for this place, by which time I was a nervous wreck and almost in like very close to being committed, because I just couldn't cope with bills, phone calls, emails, managing. And I'm a bit autistic and I'm disabled, and I'm stuck in a flat on the 3rd floor with no lift and 48 stairs. So, and no disability adaptions because it's private. So a lot of the times, even if you do manage to find somewhere, it might not necessarily be what is suitable. They take the attitude of, now you take what you get and you're lucky, because there are so few places and so many people waiting. Hackney alone has over 20,000 people waiting on the housing list. So it took me getting this place to then be able to qualify to actually move somewhere more suitable. It couldn't happen while I was homeless. The system is very, very broken, very confusing. And when you think you finally found a way around, there's normally some loophole that you will end up falling through that puts you back to square one. I think it does disproportionately hit women, because men find it easier to find friends that they can go and stay with and things like that. With women, we tend to get invites to go and stay with people, and while you're not paying rent, there may be some kind of other way that you're expected to kind of look after the person you're staying with. A lot of us end up taking on care responsibilities or moving in with boyfriends or non-stable relationships just to keep a roof over our heads, which puts a lot of women in extremely dangerous, precarious situations. The system needs to change. Unfortunately, the voices of the people who know how to change it are often consulted with, but not listened to. So no change actually comes. And because, let's face it, councils can only work with the budgets that they are given. And at the moment, the government don't want to give out anything. Look what they've just done to the nurses. It's an awful situation. And it's something that a lot of charities, whether it be homeless or disability or my own poverty, housing and sustainable, safe housing, especially for those on low income and those in precarious situations, is something that people have been desperate to change for years. And unfortunately, it's never across the board. Every council is individual to its borough. So what works in one place might not work somewhere else. And each council gets different funding, and each one has to prioritise down to pennies. And then you get the whole deserving and undeserving being brought into it, because they don't want to be seen to be putting the money in the wrong place. But really, there is no wrong place to put it. The more stable someone is, the more productive they are in society and more able to hold down a job and hold down education and get better if they're not well, or at least receive the support that they need. So it's, where's Kay's concerned, I desperately want to get hold of her and say, don't worry, it does get better. You can get round it. You just have to. I was very lucky and I got a very good social worker through my autism service. And without that, I wouldn't be sitting where I am. It is often the case that you have to find the right person in the right place at the right time. So keep trying, because it does get better.
Thank you, B. I mean, yeah, so I mean, what we've heard from Caroline, I think, and from B, is the complexity of all this. The being able to understand the law, your rights, finance, and all that. I mean, Kay went on to describe how she has been offered this place at university. It's not in Milton Keynes, it's in another town, and there is university accommodation, but she has to have a guarantor to get university accommodation. So it just seems as if there is a little bit of a situation here where can people turn to for advice, for mentoring, for support? Caroline, is this something that Homeless Link is lobbying for, or understanding a way of improving the situation?
In terms of advice, we're really conscious that the advice offered at the moment could be better, not only in local authorities, but everywhere. I think that all the services that we know about are oversubscribed. Shelter's got an emergency housing helpline, which is brilliant, 24/7 helpline, but it's oversubscribed and they struggle to manage, the demand. And I'm sure with COVID, it's been even worse, because COVID on women has been really impactful. Women have lost their jobs, as Kay mentioned. Women lost their jobs, they're working in hotels and hospitality industry, and are, desperate for support. They've been literally locked down with abusive partners and fleeing domestic violence. There's all sorts going on. And the advice offer is, I'm afraid, limited right now. So we're thinking about how we can support the sector to improve that. And part of our thinking in the future is how we can, work with our members to develop a better advice and support service. So that's one of the things we really are interested in doing. And I think that one of the things we've seen in our research we did a few years ago was that we need to see that organisational commitment to women's services. So it needs to be about the organisation itself thinking about gender all the way through. So from beginning to end, that the whole offer of the service has to be about gender, and think about how a woman would experience every aspect of that service. And that comes down, again, to having the right advice and information as well. But our members do work in this way. Some of them work in this way quite well. And there's organisations like Groundswell who do lots of peer advocacy and peer mentoring. And Groundswell in London do a lot of this work in terms of homeless people supporting other homeless people. And I think one of the ways in which we can improve that is by bringing more peers together, like Bee, to support other women who've gone through the same thing and help them come out the other side and just guide them on the way.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. And I think this will, be an issue that the Milton Keynes Women's Partnership would be very keen to continue to explore, learning from other places and learning with other places, because there is good stuff that goes on in Milton Keynes. Obviously there is, and a lot of it, but it's quite, we've heard about some of the constraints around funding and all sorts of issues, and some of the legislation is not as helpful or as clear or whatever as it could be. So we're looking at how we can learn from other places as well. But this embedding of people's voices and experience is quite hard sometimes for people in decision-making places to hear. They think they've heard it, they've done a bit of consultation, they've maybe met a person who's got a story to tell, but it's about how you embed that very varied experience of people is important, and that's what the Milton Keynes Women's Partnership is very much about. I want to move on, if I can, to just show another short video. Kerry Thompson, who's actually with us today as well. Oh, sorry, I meant to say just as well, Caroline, I believe that you do actually have an officer, a project officer, who's looking at women's homelessness issues. Am I correct?
That's right. So look, tomorrow we're launching our new women's practice development programme on ending women's homelessness. We've just been running over the last couple of years a women's grant programme, which is coming to an end. That's been funding services ending women's homelessness. We're doing a new bit of work launching tomorrow, which will look at the need to establish good practice and to pull out good practice that's going on, try to gather that, spread that good practice, and try and improve outcomes for women as well. The work will kind of have a mission to really achieve better outcomes for women by promoting good practice and sharing the learning from the current programme that's coming to them right now. So my colleague Michaela is on the call, and she'll be leading that programme. So really excited about launching that tomorrow.
That's brilliant. And I think in our chat, we've got a link to Homelessness Link as well as to ATD4. So please do follow that up if you're interested and you want to hear more about that. So we've got this little video that Kerry made for us. And thank you, Kerry, because again, she's punched such a lot into her 2 minutes. It's amazing. Which kind of touches on something we've also talked about, which is about disability, whether that's, a hidden disability or whether it's a very obvious disability, what should be considered. So over to Kerry.
Hi, I'm Kerry Thompson. I have a rare form of muscular dystrophy, a progressive muscle weakening condition. Did you know that I have a 1% chance of ever visiting any of my friends and family because their homes are inaccessible for me? I have to rely on them to come and visit me because my home is accessible. I have my own experience living in an inaccessible home. I was living on antidepressants, I wasn't going out, I was living in just one room. I wasn't able to use my wheelchair, and I was also having more trips and falls than I should have been having because my home wasn't accessible for my needs. 70% of all new homes will not have met any accessible housing standards in the next 10 years. This is despite there being a 14.1 million disabled people in the UK. What worries me is there are people right now living in a home that isn't accessible and only living in one room. That one room is acting as their bedroom, their bathroom, their kitchen and their living room. That's not a way to live. Overall, there will be just one new accessible home built in the next 10 years for every 77 people in the population. There is still step access being built into new homes. This needs to stop. We're living in a world where people with disabilities are being forced to live in nursing homes because there isn't enough accessible homes available. As much as I hate to say it, I do now live in an accessible home that meets my needs. I am able to use my electric wheelchair wherever I want to go. I have a back garden that's accessible. I have a front door that's accessible. I have doors that are inside my house that are accessible. I'm now living a very independent life that I love to live. My kitchen is accessible to meet everything meets my needs. And it shouldn't be the fact that I say to you that I'm one of the lucky ones. It should automatically be that I live in an accessible home that meets my needs. I should have the choice to live an accessible life.
Thank you, Kerry. As you can see, your video is much appreciated because, you know, you sometimes wonder, don't you, who these houses are being designed for? Where are these people who have no, you know, who are so normal that they can have steps and they can have, you know, anyway. So I just wanted to ask really then, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our particular time to talk about housing, whether, B, first of all, do you have any comments to make about what Kerry said and yeah, what comments do you have?
Thank you so much, firstly, Kerry, for doing the statistical part, because I can never remember any of it. So bravo to you. My mum had her house disabled adapted by the Council and Social Services. That took us nearly 20 years to organise, and she died within 4 years of it being finally done, which goes to say everything. Like, I have the same conditions as my mum had, so I'm slowly starting to head down that route. At the moment, I have a frame and my lovely new fall alarm, which has taken me 5 years to get this. I'm so happy. Careful I don't set it off, it's very sensitive. But there aren't enough properties, not enough are being built. When my mum died, they literally asked us within 7 days when they could have the flat back, because they had dozens of disabled people waiting to move in, which obviously broke our heart because that's our family home, but we get it. It needs to go to someone who actually needs that level of adaptation in the home. I have got zero chance of finding a house that's going to be adapted or even suitable for me. Social services will have to adapt it once I get somewhere that I'm allowed adaptations. This is also an issue if you're having to privately rent, which most people now do. You can't have adaptations made to privately rented accommodation. So you end up stuck in a house that you can't use, as Kerry said. You know, you end up having to use your bedroom for a bathroom and a shower room and everything. There are times when I can't get out of my bed. I rely on nurses 3 times a week, and my nurses get exhausted walking up my stairs. So she turns up and needs a cup of tea to recover before we even do anything. We shouldn't feel privileged in order to have a roof over our heads that we can live in and thrive in. It's a human right that you have somewhere that is safe and you can live in. Councils don't have the finances to build disabled adapted homes. They can't sell those. It's easier for them to, you know, do the small amount of social homes. There are so many people waiting on those homes that only 1 or 2 will be even vaguely adapted, and their idea of adapted often just means a ramp or step-free access. Doesn't necessarily mean the doors are wide enough, that it has a shower room. There needs to be a kind of, I don't know what the word is, but an across-the-board rule amongst councils that you have to build a minimum of certain amount of social adapted homes. It's not just about disability. As we get older, we need more adaptations. It's, you know, disability can affect you as a child all the way through to elderly. And as you get older, you can't be climbing stairs, you can't be doing things. So these houses need to be available, especially now post-COVID, because long COVID is going to be a horrible thing to deal with. We're going to have a massive uptake of conditions like, I think is it ME that you get after you've been really ill? But those sort of conditions are going to go up, and those poor souls are going to have nowhere to live or be trapped in accommodation that just won't be suitable. And sadly, as a result, people die. So it does have to be sorted at some point.
Indeed. Yes. Very good. Very helpful comment. Thank you, Bea. Caroline, you know, are you also lobbying for this to be, you know, all these different needs to be considered when people are housed?
We're certainly talking a lot about how we can ensure there's proper support in housing, because it's fine having a roof over your head, but without the support in place to keep the home, you can't stay in it. As Bea was describing that very clearly, and Kerry as well. You know, you've got to have the support in place that helps the individual to live there. I worked in old people services before. I worked in homelessness, and we had a thing back then called staying put, where you had your home adapted so you could stay in it. And I don't know what happened to those services, but that's kind of we need for all age groups, having a sort of a way you can have your home adapted, having rails put in or bathrooms, whatever you need, they can stay in that property. And it seems to take a private landlord who's kind of a kind private landlord who will do that, but they're just not, you know, it's just not happening everywhere. So there's got to be, again, a thought process about how we can ensure people have a long-term home, the support they need to keep that home. I mean, long COVID, as Bea said, is going to be a big issue. A million people is the forecast, a million who may need support in the future with long COVID. And the doctors have no idea how to treat it. There's you know, there needs to kind of develop a new specialism around long COVID, because no one seems to know how to support people who are suffering with this right now. But it's real, it's there, and it's going to be there going forward. So we have to learn to live with this. We have to find ways of supporting people who are living in homes, as Bea said, that they can no longer live in without staying in one room, because they can't manage stairs anymore because of long COVID. So yeah, we've got a long way to go, and we're certainly pushing towards having that support. And Housing First is one of the solutions we're looking at promoting, because Housing First has that whole kind of wraparound support in a home that you can stay in without any other conditions apart from you keeping that home for yourself to live in going forward.
Thank you very much. So we are coming, unfortunately, to the close of our time. This is a very important subject. So the Milton Keynes Women Partnership will definitely be coming back to it. So please get in touch with us if you'd like to be involved. And I just want to close this particular session by reading quite a short poem, actually written by Bea's mum, Maureen Roberts, because it centres everything that the Milton Keynes Women's Partnership is about, which is the importance of voices. And this poem is called All People, All Human. I'm telling the people with power that I have power too. If you stifle my voice and deny me a choice, I will not come with a weapon. I will not come in fear. I will come with others who are sisters and brothers, and a voice you will have to hear. I'm telling the people with knowledge that I have knowledge too. If you ignore my words and deny what you've heard, my knowledge will be lost to you. I will not come in anger. I will not come in pain. I will come as me with dignity, and your denial will be to your shame. I'm telling the people with control that I have control too. If you put me in chains, then hatred reigns and fear gains control of you. I will not come as a prisoner. I will not come broken to you. I will come with pride and stand by your side, because I am human too. And we always need to remember that when we're dealing with other people, don't we? Thank you again very much indeed.